Assume that Donald Trump, the former president, wishes to travel from New York to Las Vegas. How is he going to get there? Does he intend to fly Air Force One? Is he going to rent a plane? Will he purchase a ticket for a commercial airplane and travel in coach? However, what if he sends his own Trump Force One to get him? What if the former president isn't as wealthy as Trump? Or to put it another way, how do former presidents get around? First off, they are not permitted to drive when it comes to ground transportation. Prior to 2012, former presidents received Secret Service protection for 10 years after leaving office. The Former President Act of 2012, though, changed this. The Secret Service will now provide protection for the president's spouse as well as former President George W. Bush and all presidents who come after him until their deaths. Furthermore, it would be incorrect to assume that the president will use their $219,000 yearly pension to purchase a vehicle and travel the country while Secret Service officers shoot photos to post on Instagram. You know, the government made it a law that previous presidents may never drive themselves again after John F. Kennedy was shot and killed in the street. Former presidents must be driven by a Secret Service agent, and the cost of the ride is covered. The car must have adequate space to accommodate the president, their family, and the Secret Service personnel. So you may consider this to be a mini motorcade. They need a driver who has received specialized training in evasive maneuvers in case something unexpected occurs while they are on the road. The last American president to drive himself about was Lyndon B. Johnson, who left office in 1969. Before taking office, several presidents, including George W. Bush and Barack Obama, weren't accustomed to being driven around. The 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, had a driver long before he took office. This was a little disappointing for Bill Clinton because he liked driving. But according to the legislation, the president is only permitted to drive on private property and not on public roadways. Bill Clinton is only permitted to operate a golf cart on the course because of this. Anytime he needs to utilize a vehicle on public roads, a Secret Service agent will operate it. All of these regulations are in place for safety reasons because they must safeguard those who have access to more state secrets than any other public employee. There are historical anecdotes where the security regulations weren't as rigorous, like the time President Truman saw a woman struggling to corral her pigs and jumped out of his car to assist her. We ponder what George W. Bush and Bill Clinton would do. But what if the former leaders wish to visit foreign countries? The previous presidents are required to cover the expenditures of travel while flying for pleasure, vacation, or family outings. Nevertheless, there is an issue. The $219,000 are useful once the president leaves office, but they can't truly be used to reserve commercial flights. It's simply not practical. Imagine the gridlock the Obamas would create if they boarded a flight along everyone else at LAX or New York's JFK International Airport. You really don't want a bunch of people wanting to take pictures with the former president and their families at an airport. They would frequently hire a private plane because of this. For instance, Michelle Obama was spotted boarding Richard Branson's Falcon 900X private plane after President Obama left office. Richard Branson is the creator of Virgin Atlantic. She allegedly intended to vacation on Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands. Former presidents had to find alternative, non-commercial means of international travel as they were no longer able to fly on Air Force One, the Flying Fortress. Strangely, Barack Obama wasn't spotted boarding the same plane as his wife. He did, however, go to Necker Island, and we are certain that he did not use a commercial flight. But what if they need to travel for a speaking engagement to represent the former president of the United States and promote the nation? In such scenario, the government will take care of them. The key thing is that they are covered, even though it's more like the taxpayer has them covered. Let me explain. The Former Presidents Act of 1958 makes it crystal clear that certain monies will be given to former U.S. presidents for travel when the trip is connected to the former office. In other words, the ex-travel POTUS's expenses would be paid if he was scheduled to appear at a gathering as a representative of the United States. In 1969, the General Services Association, GSA, was in charge of deciding how much money would be awarded annually to former presidents, their families, and 2 staff members. They decided to allocate $1 million for the president and $500,000 for their spouse. The money, however, does not end up in bank accounts of the ex-POTUS or his spouse. The government decides whether the travel arrangements are made for personal enjoyment or official business. The ex-POTUS and their family won't get any money if they are taking a vacation. If the latter is true, the government would cover the trip or travels as long as the annual cost of travel doesn't surpass $1.5 million. Before you start getting upset that so much money is going to former presidents, Let us remind you that in 2015, only George W. Bush and his father actually used some of this money, and even then, it was only for a pitiful $66,000. The funds of the other presidents were not used at all. In relation to the Bush family, we would like to mention that in 2013, George W. Bush was a party to a private jet incident. The crew had to make an emergency landing after reporting smoke on board throughout the course of the trip. When George W. Bush accepted $100,000 as a speaking fee to attend, guess what? A veterans ceremony, the public harshly criticized him. Then, to make matters worse, the public criticized him for accepting a $20,000 private jet flight after he did so. The only ex-president who is still living is the one who is the exception to this rule. Jimmy Carter, a former president, is that person. You may not be aware that he and his wife Rosalind purchased tickets on a Delta airline to go from their native Atlanta to Washington, D.C. in order to attend the inauguration of former President Donald Trump. Speaking of the former President Trump, he's perhaps the only one who never has to inconvenience himself when flying. He utilized his personal Boeing 757, which featured golden belt buckles, his own brand of water, and an interior as opulent as that of Air Force One, even before he was flying on board that aircraft. Just before Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, took office, Trump, Melania, their son Barron, and a few other Trump family members boarded Marine One, the presidential helicopter. They were transported to Joint Base Andrews, where they boarded Air Force One, or the military-grade Boeing 747, for a final time and took off for Florida. They declared their intention to reside in Mar-a-Lago, a private residence in West Palm Beach, Florida. Trump won't really have to do any of the private aircraft chartering, though he will still have the Secret Service to drive him about. He could just board his personal Boeing 757 with his entire family, the Secret Service personnel tasked with protecting him, and take off wherever they desired. After all, the aircraft was parked at a New York airport, and it will probably start serving as Trump and his family's go-to mode of transportation. Yet there have been some claims that the aircraft needs significant repairs before it can fly. Compare that to the Carters right now. Very unlikely, they are still accumulating Delta Sky Miles. The fact that previous presidents like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Trump are nearly never spotted in public and almost never travel in private has infuriated some people. Why are people upset that the former presidents are renting planes? The reason for this is that they are using public funds to charter those aircraft. They continue to get travel grants from the government even though they earn tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions, a year through speaking engagements, book agreements, and merchandising. The FPA, according to the people, was established to preserve the respectability of the president's office. Yet it's important to note that this was passed after President Truman became so destitute that he had to live with his in-laws. The man was unable to even purchase his own home. But with today's presidents, that isn't the case. What do you think about presidents renting out their own aircraft? For now, bye.